The black sedan pulled quietly into the long driveway, its tires crunching against the gravel that glittered under the pale wash of the security lights. Ethan Ward, billionaire investor and master of the mansion at the end of the lane, leaned back against the seat and sighed. His colleagues had insisted on continuing the trip, but the endless boardroom debates had worn thin. For once, he craved silence more than applause, solitude more than attention. He hadn't told anyone he was returning early, not his driver, not his assistant, not even the staff at the house. He wanted to walk into his own home like an ordinary man who didn't need to be announced. The driver stopped at the grand front steps. Ethan grabbed his leather briefcase, nodded curtly, and dismissed him for the night. The car's taillights disappeared into the dark, leaving him standing beneath the towering archway of his mansion. The house loomed quiet, almost too quiet, its windows shadowed like half-closed eyes. Usually at this hour, the staff would be finishing up their work, the faint clinking of dishes and murmured voices drifting through the halls. Tonight, there was nothing but stillness, a silence that pressed heavily against his ears. He slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the great oak door open. The familiar scent of polished wood and faint lavender drifted toward him, comforting and strange all at once. He stepped inside, setting his briefcase down with a soft thud. For a moment, he simply stood there, soaking in the silence of a home that should have been bustling. Then he heard it, a faint shuffle, a creak against the hardwood floor, coming from the direction of the living room. Ethan froze, his hand instinctively tightening on the strap of his briefcase. His mind raced, was it a staff member working late? Or something else entirely? He started forward, his shoes making the barest whisper of sound against the polished floor. Suddenly, a figure darted out of the shadows at the base of the staircase. Ethan's heart jolted, but the figure resolved into Clara, the young maid who had been with the household barely a year. Her apron was slightly wrinkled, her hair pulled back loosely, strands falling around her pale face. But it was her expression that startled him most, wide eyes, sharp with urgency, and a finger pressed firmly against her lips. "Please, sir," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "Don't say a word, not a sound." Ethan blinked, taken aback by the audacity. "What are you?" he began, his voice rising automatically, accustomed to command. Clara's eyes flashed with a silent plea, and she stepped closer, her hand lightly gripping his sleeve. "I beg you, Mr. Ward, keep quiet, just this once." Her tone was so desperate, so unlike the obedient politeness he was used to, that it rooted him to the spot. His protest died on his lips. He glanced past her shoulder toward the living room, where the faint creak had come from, and for the first time, unease prickled at the back of his neck. Clara's grip tightened slightly, steady but trembling, as though she carried a secret far heavier than her slender frame should bear. Ethan, unused to being told what to do in his own home, found himself swallowing his questions. The mansion that had always been his fortress suddenly felt like it was hiding something he wasn't ready to see. And in the quiet, Clara's whispered request echoed in his ears, "Don't say a word." Ethan's pulse drummed in his ears as Clara tugged at his sleeve, guiding him away from the open foyer and into the shadow of the grand staircase. Her movements were sharp, precise, yet careful enough not to make a sound. He wanted to demand an explanation, to reassert the authority that had built empires and silenced boardrooms, but her wide, frantic eyes held him in place. She raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the living room. Ethan followed her gesture, his gaze narrowing. From the crack between the heavy curtains, a faint glow spilled into the hall, the orange flicker of a flashlight. His stomach clenched. That wasn't the soft light of the chandelier or the muted glow of a lamp. It was restless, darting, invasive. "They're in there," Clara mouthed soundlessly, then leaned close enough for her whisper to brush his ear. "Two men. I heard them break in an hour ago." Ethan stiffened. "Why didn't you call the police?" He hissed back, though even as the words left his lips, he realized how dangerous the volume was. Clara pressed her hand gently against his chest, urging silence. "I was afraid," she admitted, her breath shaky but controlled. They have weapons. I saw one of them with a crowbar. If I'd made a call, they might have heard me. I've been hiding here, waiting for the right moment." The weight of her words hit Ethan harder than he expected. She hadn't run. She hadn't fled into the night or locked herself in a room. Instead, she stayed, watching, thinking, protecting. From the living room came the metallic scrape of metal against metal, followed by a low muttered curse. Ethan recognized the sound instantly. It was his personal safe, embedded in the wall behind the portrait of his grandfather. He had never imagined anyone daring enough to touch it. "They're after the safe," Ethan murmured, more to himself than to her. Clara nodded, her hands tightening together nervously. "I didn't want them to know I was here." And now, she looked at him, her eyes flickering with a mixture of fear and determination. "Now you're back, and we have to be careful. If they hear us, if they realize the owner's home, they'll panic," Ethan finished grimly. Panic meant violence. For the first time in years, Ethan felt powerless in his own home. The mansion with its marble floors, its towering ceilings, its priceless art collection, it was a cage now, holding both predator and prey. He turned to Clara, studying her closely. Beneath the plain uniform and the smudge of dust on her cheek, there was a steadiness that unnerved him. "What's your plan?" he asked quietly, forcing the words past his pride. He wasn't used to asking advice, especially not from a maid, but this wasn't a boardroom negotiation. This was survival. Clara's lips pressed together. "We don't confront them. Not yet. There are passages, hidden service corridors behind the walls. Most people don't know about them, but I've seen the blueprints while cleaning the library. We can move without being seen." Her knowledge startled him. He had inherited the house from his father years ago and barely paid attention to its structure beyond what he needed. Yet here was Clara, the maid, recalling its secrets with the precision of an architect. "We'll use the passages to get close," she continued. "We can trap them. The wine cellar has reinforced doors. If we lure them in there." The idea was audacious, bordering on reckless, but Ethan felt a spark of something he hadn't felt in years: trust, begrudging and raw. From the living room came another thud, louder this time. The men were growing impatient. Ethan glanced toward the sound, then back at Clara. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze didn't waver. "All right," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "Lead the way." Clara moved first, gliding along the wall with a lightness that came from habit, years of knowing how to clean and move about without disturbing anyone. Ethan followed, his taller frame less graceful, but careful to mimic her silence. They slipped down a narrow hallway that led toward the back of the house, the air cooler and tinged with the faint scent of cedar. Clara paused at a panel set flush into the wall, almost invisible in the dim light. With practiced hands, she pressed along its edge until the latch gave way with the faintest click. Ethan raised his brows. "How do you?" "Later," she whispered, slipping inside. "Hurry." He ducked after her, pulling the panel closed behind them. Instantly, the world shifted. The service corridor was narrow, the walls unfinished, wooden beams exposed. The space smelled faintly of dust and stone, carrying the chill of places that rarely saw light. The passage was barely wide enough for the two of them to move side by side. Their footsteps echoed softly, and Ethan found himself holding his breath, afraid even that small sound might betray them. Ahead, Clara moved with certainty, one hand brushing lightly along the wall, the other holding a small flashlight she must have kept hidden in her apron pocket. Its weak glow cast their shadows long and thin against the walls, stretching like specters. Ethan glanced at her, struck by the composure in her movements. She wasn't just improvising, she had thought this through. They reached a small grate, its slats allowing a partial view into the living room. Clara crouched, motioning for Ethan to do the same. Through the opening, he could see the intruders clearly for the first time. Two men, dressed in dark clothes, their faces obscured by black caps pulled low. One was hunched over his safe, muttering curses as he tried combination after combination. The other paced the room, crowbar in hand, his shoulders tense. Ethan's jaw tightened. His safe wasn't just full of cash, it contained private documents, contracts, and mementos that carried more weight than any jewel. Watching strangers handle it made his blood boil. Clara placed a hand lightly on his arm, steadying him before his anger betrayed them. She leaned close, her lips near his ear. "The cellar is below. If we move now, we can reach it before they notice. We'll have to draw them down." Ethan studied her, incredulous. "Draw them down? And how exactly?" She gave a small, grim smile. "By making them think they're not alone." It was madness, but it was also clever. Ethan found himself nodding despite every instinct screaming at him. Together, they crept farther through the passage until it opened into another hidden panel, this one leading near the cellar stairs. Clara paused, her breath shallow, then whispered, "When I make the sound, be ready to close the cellar door. It locks from this side." Ethan swallowed hard. He had signed billion-dollar deals, but this, trusting his life to the maid, was a gamble unlike any other. Clara picked up a loose piece of wood from the passage floor and slipped it through a vent that opened into the hall. She let it fall with a sharp clatter, the sound echoing like footsteps. Immediately, the pacing intruder stopped. What was that? He barked. The other cursed again. Check it out. Now. Ethan felt his heart hammer as the man with the crowbar stalked toward the noise. Clara grabbed Ethan's hand, tugging him silently behind the panel. They waited, breaths held, as the footsteps drew nearer. And in that moment, Ethan realized, this wasn't just about outsmarting thieves. It was about trust. His trust in Clara, and her terrifying, steady courage guiding them into the heart of danger. The footsteps drew closer, heavy and suspicious, each one echoing down the hall like a countdown. Ethan pressed himself against the cool wood of the panel, every muscle taut, as Clara gripped the hidden latch. Her face was pale in the dim glow of her small flashlight, but her eyes, sharp, unblinking, never wavered. She gave him a single nod, a signal, and then she pushed the panel open just enough to slip into the corridor beyond. Ethan followed, his pulse hammering like a war drum. The intruder stepped into view, crowbar glinting faintly under the security lights that filtered through the windows. He muttered under his breath, scanning the shadows. Clara raised the piece of wood she'd carried, then dropped it again with a calculated clatter. The man stiffened. Someone's here, he hissed, his voice low but edged with alarm. Where? Came the muffled reply of his partner, still busy at the safe. In the hall. Maybe downstairs. Perfect. Clara exchanged a glance with Ethan, urging him silently toward the stairwell that led into the wine cellar. They slipped through another service panel, descending into the cool stone space below. The air smelled of oak barrels and damp earth. Ethan's chest tightened as he realized how precarious the plan truly was. They were willingly placing themselves in the same space they hoped to trap their enemies in. Clara gestured quickly to the heavy iron door. It locks from the outside, she whispered. All we need is to get them in. And then, louder, just loud enough to carry into the hall, she knocked twice on a barrel, the sound deep and hollow. Ethan flinched at the risk, but it worked. Above them, the intruder's boots thundered against the floorboards. Down here, he barked. The cellar door creaked open, spilling a wedge of faint light into the dark chamber. The first man stepped inside, crowbar raised, his eyes scanning wildly. A moment later, the second intruder appeared, panting with frustration, his hands grimy from the failed attempt at cracking the safe. Ethan crouched behind a stack of barrels, ready to spring. Clara slipped behind the doorframe, her hand hovering near the locking mechanism. The two men advanced further inside, their mutters bouncing off the stone walls. Nothing here, the first grumbled. Then what the hell did we hear? The second snapped. Clara caught Ethan's eye. Now, in a swift movement, Ethan lunged forward, shoving a barrel with all his strength. It rolled across the floor with a thunderous crash, drawing both men's attention. Clara seized the chance, she slammed the door shut and twisted the lock into place. The men reacted instantly, pounding on the iron from inside, their shouts muffled but furious. Hey, open this door. You can't do this. Ethan exhaled, adrenaline flooding his veins. Relief swept through him, until Clara's expression faltered. Her hands trembled now, not from fear, but from something heavier. One of them, she whispered hoarsely, not looking at him. The younger one, he's my brother. Ethan froze. What? Tears brimmed in her eyes, though her voice stayed firm. I thought he'd left that life behind. I begged him to. I didn't call the police right away because I couldn't risk him getting shot if anyone stormed in. Ethan's anger warred with understanding. He looked at the locked door, then back at Clara, the maid who had just saved his life and his fortune, even at the cost of betraying her own blood. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the muffled curses from the cellar. Finally, Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. We'll deal with this together. But you saved this house tonight, Clara. And you saved me. Her tears spilled over, but she lifted her chin. For the first time, Ethan saw her not as a servant, but as the bravest soul in the mansion.